Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Rosie and if you are new here, please do subscribe. So in today's video, I'm going to talk you through ISO or ISO depending on how you say it. So I did two videos recently. The first one talking about aperture in terms of what the numbers mean, what does the aperture change in photography, how do I use it, all this kind of information. I'll leave it linked here. And the second video I did recently was talking about shutter speed. Again, what do the numbers mean? How do I use it? When do I use different shutter speeds? All that information, I will leave that linked here as well. So you have those two to look back on. Either watch them before this one or after this video. Anything works. It's just all good information for photography beginners. But like I said, in today's video, we're going to talk about ISO. So what is ISO? ISO is the camera's sensitivity to light. How does ISO affect your photographs? So it affects the photographs in two different ways. The first way is the light, and the second way is the amount of noise in the photograph. So depending on your settings, you might have a lot of light or not a lot of light, a lot of noise or not a lot of noise. I'm going to show you some charts and dive into this a little bit more and explain it a little bit further so that you understand what I mean by this. But that's basically the basics of ISO. It affects the light and the noise. What do the numbers mean? So basically, the lower the number, the less light is allowed into the photograph. So on a bright sunny day, you would use ISO 100. On a dark, inside in a dark room, you might use 3200, for example. I'm going to put some charts on the screen just to talk you through this a little bit more and help explain it. So this photograph here is a good example of how the ISO can affect the photograph. So the first one is ISO 200, and obviously that's super dark. 400, 800, all the way up to 6400, and 6400 is obviously a little bit too bright maybe. But this just shows you that if you use a higher number ISO, the photograph is going to be brighter. There's this one here of the wine glass. The first one is ISO 200 and the second one is ISO 400. So as you can see, it just makes the photograph brighter. The next one is this rainbow photograph. So ISO 100 is super dark, and then ISO 1600 is probably perfect. That seems well exposed on that one. So you can see the range of photographs and how it goes from dark to light. So a low number means there is less light, and the high number means there is more light. And the last one here of this Eiffel Tower, so ISO 200 is too dark, ISO 400 is a little bit brighter, and then 1600 is super bright and gorgeous. So that's just a couple of examples of how the ISO can affect the light in a photograph. So the second way that ISO can affect a photograph is the amount of noise that's in the photograph. I'm going to show you some diagrams and some charts as well and things to help illustrate this a little bit more and help explain it. So let's dive into that. So the first one here is this red cactus. As you can see, ISO 400 is perfect, it's beautifully smooth, it's wonderful. ISO 800, 1600, and you go all the way down to 65,535. I've never shot that high, I didn't even know that existed. But you can see all the noise there. It's really, really fuzzy, it's not sharp at all. And that's what happens when you use a high ISO number. It just ends up being fuzzy and blurry and not great quality at all. Again here, I think this is a bird's wing or something. ISO 200 is pretty crisp, and then if you look at ISO 6400, that is just noisy and pixelated. You can see the background there, all the noise in the photograph. It's really not great. Again, there's this one as well with the city, I think it's New York maybe. The first photograph is ISO 200 and that's nice and smooth. ISO 1600, you can see there's noise in the background there in that grey square. And this last one I think is a great example as well of this doll's face. So ISO 200 is perfectly smooth, everything looks lovely. ISO 3200 and everything is kind of just noisy, that's the word. It's not blurry, it's noisy, there's just a lot of information in there, a lot of black dots, and it's just not nice at all. So hopefully from those charts you can see how ISO affects the light and also the noise of the photograph. So I understand you might not know when to use these different settings, so I'm going to show you some charts as well to help explain that. So this chart here is a really great one to look at. ISO 100 to 200 is used during the day. So when I'm out in Miami taking photographs, I use ISO 100 because there's a lot of light here, it's very, very sunny. I always use ISO 100. ISO 200 to 400 is great for in the shade or indoors. ISO 400 to 800 is good for flash indoors, 800 to 1600 darker indoors, indoors at night, and extra low light for fireworks, things like that, 3200 plus. Now I will say that after about 800 you do get a lot of noise, and I try not to push it that far. You can, obviously it depends on the camera as well. Certain cameras can deal better with higher ISO numbers, and also you can edit a tiny bit in Lightroom in terms of the noise reduction. But this is a great chart just to keep in mind. It's just to kind of get the basics of, which ISO you should use for different settings. This is another great little chart here talking about the noise and when you would use the ISO settings. So ISO 100 is for full sun, clear sky, bright scenes. So very, very bright day you would use ISO 100 and there is not going to be any noise there. Maybe ISO 400 is when there's clouds, and if you're indoors and it's kind of bright. 1600 is for dark indoor scenes and outdoors at night. And then 6400 is dark scenes to keep images stable. And in those ones, there's going to be a lot of noise in those photographs. Anything above, like I said, anything above 800, you tend to get a lot of noise. So try and keep below there if you can. Obviously, it depends on the photograph that you're taking. And this is the last little chart here. So again, ISO 100 is in the full sun with no shade. 200, lots of sun, but could be in partial shade. Could be a little bit overcast. 400 is in the shade. 800 is when you're going to get the noise warning, so you might get a little bit of noise there. If the sun is starting to set, sunrise, sunset, that kind of day, you might be in between 640 and 800. And then it kind of goes down here, shows you different settings, and 1600 inside a dark room where there is a light source, so a theatre or a school production, etc. So as you can see from these charts, the ISO affects the amount of light in the photograph, and it also affects the amount of noise. So I've now talked about ISO, aperture and shutter speed. My next video I'm going to be talking about how to combine all three in different settings so that you get perfect photographs. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do give it a big thumbs up and make sure you subscribe for more videos, and I will see you very soon. Bye!